All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, boys and girls, gather around. I have a little story for you. The year was 2008. Barack Obama was on his way to winning the Democratic nomination, and I was a young mom with my first baby girl, Ella. In fact, Ella had actually been born on the day before the Democratic primary where I was living at the time in Ohio. So I was still in the hospital and unable to cast my ballot for my candidate of choice. You ready for this one? Hillary Rodham Clinton, that's who I would have voted for, but you didn't see that one coming. At the time, I was really only sort of semi-politically engaged. I watched the debates, generally thought Hillary was better on health care, worse on foreign policy. The Iraq War had been the first thing that drew me into the political arena at all, but that issue that would actually end up radicalizing me and lead to me running for Congress in 2010 was maybe an unusual one: baby bottles. Because when I went to shop for bottles for my little baby Ella, the most precious thing I had ever known or would ever know, I had a realization that actually floored me. Although completely illegal in Europe, toxic BPA had yet to be banned in the U.S. from being used in baby bottles. So as I stood in the Babies R Us staring at the endless wall of bottles, I realized I had to be hyper-educated and hyper-vigilant to make sure not to purchase a bottle that could be toxic for my newborn. How could this be, I thought to myself? How could the federal government have failed on such an essential and critical task of protecting the absolute most vulnerable? The answer, of course, was obvious. Some plastics manufacturing interest had bought off Congress and convinced the regulators to look the other way. Maybe they sponsored some pseudoscience that they could hold up to provide a fig leaf of cover for these scoundrels who chose to take the cash and look away. All of a sudden, I saw the connection between the Iraq War, our disastrous healthcare system, and baby bottles. The system had been thoroughly corrupted by money and interest, from the war profiteers to big pharma to big business, and that was before the banks were even bailed out. Now today, BPA has belatedly been banned from baby bottles, but our government is still utterly failing to protect our precious children from toxins with potentially devastating effect. You ready for this? Corporate America is literally knowingly poisoning babies, and the regulators at the FDA have known and looked the other way. I'm not kidding. Look at this. 4 leading baby food manufacturers knowingly sold baby food that contained high levels of toxic heavy metals, according to internal company documents included in a congressional investigation that was released on Thursday. In fact, every single manufacturer that responded to the request for data from Congress was knowingly poisoning babies. Possibly even more worrying is the fact that 3 large baby food makers, Sprout Organic Foods, Walmart, and Campbell's Soup Company, which sell Plum Organics, all refuse to provide data. So here are some of the specifics, just to give you a sense here. This, again, is from CNN. Internal testing done by Gerber Beech Nut Nutrition Company, Nurture Inc., which sells Happy Baby products, and Hain Celestial Group Inc., which sells Earth's Best Organic Baby Food, showed levels of heavy metals far above limits set for bottled water by the FDA and the U.S. EPA, the congressional investigators found. Baby food ingredients in certain products contained up to 91 times the inorganic arsenic level, up to 177 times the lead level, up to 69 times the cadmium level, and up to 5 times the mercury level allowed in bottled water, the report said. Yet the company still approved those products for sale. Companies were also found to be cooking the books by only testing individual ingredients that went into their products when the finished products had significantly elevated levels. So according to congressional investigators, this information was revealed to the FDA in a secret meeting in the summer of 2019 with the maker of Earth's Best Organic. A slide presentation at the meeting showed that in every single instance, the levels of inorganic arsenic were between 28 and 93% higher in the finished product than they were when the ingredients were tested separately. Since learning that shocking information, the Trump administration FDA did absolutely nothing. In another instance, the maker of Happy Baby actually did test the finished product. They found lead, arsenic, cadmium, and mercury to be higher than the standard that the company themselves had set, and they sold the product anyway. It is pure evil, capitalism style. It might cost a little extra to make food that isn't toxic to vulnerable infants, so the companies do the duty to their shareholders by keeping the poisons in. Regulators cozy up with the very interests they're supposed to be policing because, God forbid, the revolving door into that industry be locked. Congress has now issued a report. We'll see if the public becomes outraged enough to actually force a change here. I honestly can't think of a story that shows more clearly the unmitigated evil which can result from the unholy alliance of unchecked capitalism and corrupt governance. two great tastes that taste like arsenic in baby food together. Now, when we talk about core rot on this show, this is what we mean. A regulatory system that has been stripped bare and captured by 40 years of anti-government attacks. A nation state that is so immoral it can't even perform its most basic or sacred functions. My baby girl is going to turn 13 in a month, and it kills me to realize that all these years later, nothing has changed except the billionaires are even richer. Can you think of anything that is like more unconscionable?
No.
The FDA knew that this was a problem, did nothing. These companies, they were doing the testing.
They don't care.
To know that, I mean, just to be really clear, no level of lead is safe for a newborn. No level. And they know that this stuff is in there and just send it out anyway.
Yeah, they just send it. And you know, it's so interesting because this is a multi-decade thing, as you point out to. And this really is, if there's any core critique of the show, it's of this. And, you know, I've actually been reading recently about Enron, the collapse of Enron. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing. Like, you go back, I mean, I was a child when all this was going on. I'm like, this is insane. Like, how did they let all this stuff pass? But you can actually see the script for the 2008 financial crisis written exactly there. And then you can see the script for all of the shenanigans that we see on Wall Street today written within that. And you're like, you point to this, the regulatory structure. This is actually, it's like baby food is just the prime example of so much of our entire agricultural monopolistic complex. Like the amount of things that people get away with whenever it comes to meat labeling, whenever it comes to like the what safety procedures and more can go into packing. I mean, factory farm, that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
Like there's an entire industry and complex where they have written the rules of the regulatory structure. And people, unfortunately, are much more trusting of this than they really should be. Because as you point out, you know, I mean, this is basically your child, but when it has a stamp, I mean, it's in the grocery store, right? You're like, it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
But it can literally be poison.
Some of these brands, too, that we're talking about here, these are high-end brands.
Right.
The organic, you know, the people who PMC go to the store and they want the best for their baby and whatever and shell out the extra dollars. I mean, this wasn't just the low end. This was everybody. Like everybody who submitted data. And then you're even more worried these people, the Walmart and the other ones that didn't submit data, like what are they trying to hide? We have no idea. And so the way this works is first, try to buy off Congress with campaign donations and with lobbyists to make sure that the law doesn't get passed in the first place. Then if the law does get passed, well, then you go to the regulatory bodies. And because of that revolving door between the regulators and the industries they're supposed to be policing, oftentimes they take a hands-off approach. I mean, you look at the history of the Oxy crisis in this country. It is the exact same story of the regulators letting language slide that indicated Oxy was non-addictive, even though there was no scientific evidence to be proven, and then some of those regulators going and working for pharma after they served their term. And then you have a simultaneous effort over decades, and this is the other thing we're talking about here, from the Kochs, from the libertarian right, to strip the ability to have funding for these agencies so that they can test and certify and make sure that consumers are being kept safe and that labor standards are being enforced and all of that. So when they're completely cut to the bone, they just don't have the resources to do the things that they're supposed to be doing in the first place. Yeah,
that's actually an even big part of the story, too, which another thing I've been learning is that a lot of the times these regulatory agencies are so small and so strapped, they have to wait for media reports like this in order to be like, wait, we should investigate that.
Right.
I mean, just think about how convoluted it is that they have to go and read the Wall Street Journal or whomever in order to get a tip on how they are supposed to do their jobs. And it's because they have so much on their plate that they literally cannot focus or do routine due diligence, and stuff like this just flies under the radar. And sadly, it is really just like the tip of the iceberg whenever it comes to regulation around safety, food safety, around maybe baby products. Again, it's actually a very unregulated industry for a lot of the stuff. And yeah, it's terrible.
It is terrible. So Congress has issued a report. We'll see if they do anything further. All right, Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That's next.